Magnolia, Alabama isn't the kind of place people end up by accident. It's small, tucked between long stretches of farmland and two quiet highways that see more logging trucks than tourists. When you drive into town, you pass the faded green "Welcome to Magnolia" sign, the one with chipped paint and a bullet hole someone probably put there decades ago. The grocery store, a hardware shop, and a diner called Millie's Place make up most of downtown. On Friday nights, the high school football field lights glow like a beacon you can see all the way from the county line. It's the sort of town where people wave from their porches and ask about your mama when you pick up milk, where everybody knows who everyone is, at least the version they think they see. I lived in Magnolia my whole life. My name is Katelyn Mercer, and if you ask the folks I grew up around, they'd describe me as sweet, quiet, well-mannered, or
Magnolia, Alabama isn't the kind of place people end up by accident. It's small, tucked between long stretches of farmland and two quiet highways that see more logging trucks than tourists. When you drive into town, you pass the faded green "Welcome to Magnolia" sign, the one with chipped paint and a bullet hole someone probably put there decades ago. The grocery store, a hardware shop, and a diner called Millie's Place make up most of downtown. On Friday nights, the high school football field lights glow like a beacon you can see all the way from the county line. It's the sort of town where people wave from their porches and ask about your mama when you pick up milk, where everybody knows who everyone is, at least the version they think they see. I lived in Magnolia my whole life. My name is Katelyn Mercer, and if you ask the folks I grew up around, they'd describe me as sweet, quiet, well-mannered, or one of the good ones. I worked at Penny's Pharmacy on Main Street, the same pharmacy where my mother worked before she passed. I went to church on Sundays, never missed a casserole fundraiser, and always returned my grocery cart, even when it was raining. People thought they knew me. People thought my life was simple and safe. But Magnolia has two sides, the one everyone talks about and the one people whisper about. My story lives in the whispered part. The first time I realized Magnolia wasn't going to save me from anything was when I was 22, sitting in the bleachers of the high school gym, watching my future husband, Tyler Mercer, receive the Magnolia Community Safety Award. It was a fancy title that meant he'd helped pull a driver out of a burning truck a month earlier. The whole town stood for him. They clapped like he was a hero sent straight from heaven. I clapped too. I was dating him back then, barely 6 months in, and I believed I'd found the kind of man girls dream about marrying. He was handsome, with that clean-cut Alabama confidence that seemed to follow him everywhere. He knew how to talk to adults, charm kids, and make women blush. He worked as a mechanic at Harper Automotive, where everyone trusted him with their cars. To Magnolia, Tyler was golden. To me, at first, he was comforting in a way I didn't know men could be. He brought me peach milkshakes after work and left notes on my windshield that said things like, "You're the prettiest girl in Alabama," or "Dinner at 7, where's something that makes you smile?" But people also have shadows, and his showed early. I just didn't recognize it for what it was. It started with little things. Him questioning my friends, asking why I wore certain clothes, and always wanting to know where I was. It felt like attention, like care. I mistook control for affection. That's how it happens. Not all at once. Piece by piece, until the person you were starts fading. Fast forward nearly a decade, and the Magnolia everyone saw wasn't the Magnolia I knew. I lived in a white ranch-style house on Cedar Lane with a trimmed lawn and a porch swing Tyler insisted on installing one spring. He never actually built it. His brothers did. Tyler just took the credit. You learn to stop correcting people when you live with someone like him. On the surface, our home looked perfectly normal. Inside, It was a gallery of unspoken rules. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't leave dishes in the sink. I didn't challenge him, even in small things. If he was in a good mood, dinner was peaceful. If he wasn't, the quiet became sharp enough to cut skin. The bruises came later. They were always where clothes could hide them. My ribs, my back, the underside of my upper arms. He never apologized. He always blamed me. You made me mad. You shouldn't have talked back. You know how I get when you don't listen. The first time he hit me, he cried afterward, begged me to stay, promised it would never happen again. It happened again 2 weeks later. Over time, I stopped expecting apologies. Things reached a breaking point on a Sunday morning in late October. Magnolia's air had cooled just enough that you needed a sweater, and the leaves behind the church were turning gold. I wore a long-sleeved dress that hid the fading blue mark on my shoulder. Tyler had slammed a door into me 2 nights before because I'd accidentally knocked over his beer can. We arrived at Harrington Baptist Church like we always did. He parked the truck perfectly straight, smoothed his shirt, and placed his hand on my back as we walked, firm enough to guide me, light enough to look loving. People greeted him first. Always him.
Then me. Never the other way around. After service, groups gathered outside, talking about football and local gossip. I stood a little apart with a cup of church coffee that tasted like burnt cardboard. The warm sunlight did nothing to ease the cold inside my chest. Tyler was laughing with his friends across the parking lot, telling some story that made them slap their knees. He looked relaxed, happy, alive. I watched him with a stillness I didn't understand at the time. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, staring down into a place you know you shouldn't go, but part of you already has. A thought came to me. Quiet, slight, like a thread slipping loose. I don't have to stay. It felt wrong, unnatural, like a sin whispered in a sacred place. Women in Magnolia didn't leave husbands. They prayed, they endured, they shared recipes. They didn't leave. But the thought didn't drift away. It settled in, tightened, grew. When we got home from church, the house felt heavier than usual. Tyler turned on the football game and cracked open a beer, leaving me to make lunch. I moved through the kitchen like a ghost. My hands chopped onions and stirred soup, but my mind replayed one single truth over and over. If I don't leave, he will eventually kill me. That wasn't dramatics. That was something my body knew before my mind wanted to admit it. I placed the soup on the table and sat across from him. He didn't look up from the TV. During halftime, he grunted something about going to Rick's bar that night with his friends. I didn't remind him he had work early the next morning. That kind of comment could ignite a fire. Instead, I nodded, and something clicked. Rick's bar, drinking, late night driving. His way of taking County Road 16 because it was faster. His way of flooring the gas pedal after a rough day. A shape formed in my mind. A terrible shape. A dangerous, desperate one. I could drive him home that night. It would be late. He'd be drunk. He wouldn't pay attention. County Road 16 curved sharply after the old Miller barn. The drop on the right side went down more than 20 feet, lined with trees thick enough to stop any vehicle dead. If we hit those trees at the right angle, it would look like an accident. No one would question it. No one would blame me, and I would finally be free. The thought made my stomach twist, but not with guilt, with relief. Hours later, when Tyler left for the bar, I stood in our dim kitchen staring at my reflection in the microwave door. I didn't recognize the woman looking back at me. Her eyes looked hollowed out, her shoulders heavy, her breath uneven. Then I imagined her free, alive, safe. It felt like oxygen. I grabbed my jacket, locked the door, and drove to Rick's to pick him up later. On the way, I passed the entrance to County Road 16. The trees leaned over the pavement like witnesses. Everything inside me whispered, "This is your chance." But life doesn't follow plans. Life doesn't hand you clean escapes. It has its own timing, its own cruelty. And what happened next on that dark Alabama road didn't match the plan forming in my head. It was worse, and it changed everything.
On Sunday nights, Rick's bar sits off Highway 43 like a neon-lit secret. The parking lot is gravel, the sign flickers when the wind blows, and the regulars are mostly factory workers, mechanics, and men who don't want to go home yet. Magnolia doesn't have many places where people hide, but Rick's is one of them. Tyler called it his unwinding spot. I called it the countdown to danger. He'd gone there for years, long before we got married. Sunday nights were predictable. He'd drink too much, talk too loudly, and stumble out to the truck with a swagger he didn't deserve. Most nights, he drove himself. Sometimes he barely made it home. But this time, I had offered to pick him up. My voice had been steady when I said it, steady enough that he didn't question me. By the time I reached Rick's, the October night air had turned sharp, the kind that made the skin on your arms prickle. The parking lot was nearly full. Rows of pickups, dusty sedans, and a couple of old motorcycles leaning like lazy guard dogs. Inside, the bar was crowded and loud. Country music played from a jukebox in the corner, and the smell of fried food clung to everything. A group of men shouted at the TV above the counter, reacting to a football replay. Laughter burst out intermittently, sharp and boisterous. I spotted Tyler near the back booth with two of his friends, Drew Holloway and Sam Jenkins. They were longtime friends of his, the kind of men who thought heavy drinking was a personality trait. Tyler's face was flushed, his eyes glassy, and he slammed back the last sip of his beer when he saw me approaching. "Look who finally showed up," he said, slurring slightly. "You took your sweet time." I ignored the barb. Tonight wasn't about fighting small battles. Tonight was about ending a war. "I came as soon as you called," I said evenly. Drew cluckled. "Let the lady breathe, man. She's here, ain't she?" Tyler stood, swayed a little, then caught himself with a hand on the table. His friends laughed, but there was no humor in it, just drunk camaraderie. He tossed a few bills onto the table and slung his arm around my shoulders. The weight of it was familiar but unbearable. "Let's go," he said. "I want to get home." Home. The place I'd been trying to escape for years. I steadied him out the door. The night air hit him harder than it hit me. He stumbled once, then laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. As we approached our truck, he stopped. "Give me the keys," he muttered. "You're drunk, Tyler. I'm driving." I said give 'em. The old fear rose, instinctively. Tight, coiled, automatic. But tonight, I didn't flinch. I held the keys firmly. "You can barely stand. I'm driving." He glared at me with the slow, simmering anger I knew too well. But something about the night, or him, was different. He didn't push the argument. Maybe he was too tired. Maybe he was too drunk. He grunted and climbed into the passenger seat. I buckled my seatbelt. He didn't. The gravel crunched under the tires as I pulled onto the road. The bar's neon lights faded behind us, swallowed by the dark Alabama countryside. Tyler leaned his head against the window, mumbling incoherently about the football game, about Drew's new truck, about why the bartender kept giving him looks. He didn't notice the turn I took, that I did. A left onto County Road 16, the road nobody uses, the road that curves like a question mark, the road that has taken lives before. The trees stood tall on both sides, their branches reaching over the pavement like archways in a cathedral. The moonlight barely filtered through, leaving the road in deep shadows. My headlights carved out a small, trembling tunnel of visibility. I gripped the steering wheel. My breath slowed. My hands tightened. My heart steadied into a determined rhythm. Tyler didn't notice any of it. "Drive faster," he muttered, eyes half closed. "I hate this road. Too damn slow." I didn't respond. My plan had been cleared in my mind for hours. I would accelerate, the turn would come, the drop would follow, and the tree line would finish what I couldn't. A clean exit, a tragic accident, freedom. I imagined myself crying at the funeral, wearing black. People comforting me, telling me I'd been a good wife, that I didn't deserve this. The image disgusted me, but it also felt like survival. As the truck rolled deeper into the darkness, the curve approached. I knew every inch of this road. I knew where the yellow lines faded, where the asphalt dipped slightly, where the guardrail used to be before the last big storm washed it away. All I had to do was turn the wheel a little too sharply. A split-second decision. A flick of the wrist, and everything would be over. My pulse thudded in my ears. I loosened my grip on the wheel for one breath, then tightened it again. But before I could move, before I could act, Tyler's hand shot out, not towards me, but toward the wheel. His fingers wrapped around it suddenly, aggressively, drunkenly. "You going too slow," he growled. "Let me drive." He yanked at the wheel hard. Everything that followed happened at once. The truck skidded violently to the right, tire screeching against the road. The headlights veered off the pavement, slicing into the darkness of the trees. "Tyler, stop!" I screamed, but he was drunk. He was angry. He was out of control. He jerked the wheel again. The truck fishtailed, slid, and the back tires lost all traction.
We were no longer driving. We were sliding. The trees rushed toward us. A thickening twist of motion dragged my stomach up into my throat. The sound of tearing gravel echoed like thunder beneath the truck. My seatbelt locked, pulling tight against my chest. Tyler didn't have his on. I heard him curse, loud, sharp, panicked. Then, everything went white. The truck spun. The hillside dropped out from under us. The world flipped. Glass exploded. Metal crunched. My head snapped forward, then violently back. I screamed, but there was no air to make sound. The last thing I felt was the cold night air hitting my face as the truck rolled, the smell of pine needles rushing in, and the sensation that I was falling through the world. Then darkness. A deep, smothering darkness that didn't hurt, didn't burn, didn't fear. Just nothing. When I opened my eyes again, I thought I was dead. The world was upside down. Literally. I was hanging in my seatbelt, suspended, my hair dangling toward broken glass and dirt. The truck was overturned, resting on its roof. Smoke drifted from the crumpled hood, illuminated faintly by one surviving headlight, flickering like it was dying too. My body ached everywhere, sharp pains, dull throbs, burning cuts. My mouth tasted like iron. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. I didn't know what had happened. My mind was a tangled mess of light and sound and memory. Then I heard something. A groan. A thick, painful,
human grown. Tyler. I turned my head slowly, carefully, to the side. He was half lodged against the passenger window, his body twisted unnaturally. Blood ran from his hairline down across his cheek. His chest moved unevenly, shallow breaths that sounded wet. He wasn't wearing a seatbelt. He hadn't stood a chance against the roll. Fear and something else, something darker, rippled through me. He was alive, barely, but alive. My mind raced. My body trembled. Every instinct told me to move, to get out, to find help. But another instinct, the one born from years of fear, froze me. What if he lived? What if he woke up angry? What if he blamed me? What if the nightmare continued? My breath hitched. For a second, I thought about staying still, just staying there, letting fate decide. But a rustling noise outside shook me from the thought. A deer, startled by the wreck, darted off into the woods. The smell of gasoline hit my nose, sharp and terrifying. The truck could catch fire. I forced my shaking hands toward the seatbelt latch. It clicked open and I dropped onto the shattered glass below. Pain shot up my arms, but adrenaline drowned most of it out. I crawled, slow, dragging movements, out through the broken driver's side window. The night air was cold and raw against my skin. My vision blurred, then sharpened, then blurred again. I stood on unsteady legs, gripping a tree trunk to stay upright. Behind me, the overturned truck hissed softly, steam rising into the dark sky. I looked at Tyler again through the broken window. For the first time in 10 years, he looked small, fragile, human. The man who had towered over me, the man whose anger had ruled every corner of our home, lay crushed under the weight of his own choices. He groaned again, a sound of pain, a reminder that he was still alive. I stumbled backward, tears stinging my eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming shock of being alive. I hadn't caused this accident. He had. He had grabbed the wheel. He had lost control. He had nearly killed us both. The plan I whispered to myself in secret, the plan I thought I had been ready to execute, had been stripped from my hands and replaced by something far more brutal. This wasn't my doing. This wasn't my timing. This was chaos. This was inevitability. This was fate. My heart pounded as I fumbled for my phone in my jacket pocket. My fingers were bloody, shaking uncontrollably, but I managed to press 911. A calm voice answered. 911, what's your emergency? I stared at the wreck, at the broken trees, at the debris scattered across the forest floor, at the man who had terrorized me for years, and the truth settled heavy in my chest. I didn't need to kill Tyler. He had done this himself. Through trembling lips, through a voice that didn't sound like mine anymore, I finally spoke. There's been an accident. My husband, he's hurt. We're on County Road 16. Please hurry. As the dispatcher gave instructions, my knees buckled. I slid down the tree trunk and sat in the dirt, gasping as the enormity of what happened crashed over me. The sirens were still far away. The night was so quiet. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid. Not of Tyler. Not of Magnolia. Not of tomorrow. I had survived the accident. He wasn't guaranteed to. The sound of sirens in the distance carried through the Alabama night like a lifeline, thin, trembling, and miles away. I sat in the dirt at the base of a pine tree, my back pressed against its rough bark, my legs shaking uncontrollably. Wind rustled the leaves above me, and for a moment it felt like the woods themselves were whispering, reminding me to breathe. My head throbbed, a steady pulse at the back of my skull. My arms and hands were scraped raw from shattered glass. The cold night air seeped through my torn jacket, chilling the sweat on my skin. Every breath felt too shallow, like my lungs weren't ready to trust the world yet. The overturned truck was only a few feet away, its frame twisted like a crushed can. Steam rose from the mangled engine. The single surviving headlight flickered weakly before dimming altogether, plunging the wreck into near blackness. My eyes adjusted to the moonlight, but everything still felt unreal, like I was watching someone else's tragedy. Tyler was still inside, still breathing, still alive. The knowledge didn't comfort me. It terrified me in a way I couldn't explain, not because I wanted him dead, but because for the first time I realized how close I had been to losing myself entirely. I listened carefully for any sound from him. There were none. No groans, no coughing, no movement. Only the distant sirens grew louder, slow at first, then steady. The dispatcher's voice still echoed in my mind. Help is on the way. Stay where you are. Don't re-enter the vehicle. I wouldn't have re-entered that truck if you'd promised me a future in gold. When the first flash of red and blue lights cut through the trees, something in me loosened. Not relief, not gratitude, something closer to surrender. Like my body finally accepted it could stop fighting for just a moment. The ambulance and fire truck pulled up on the road above us, their engines humming against the silence. Figures spilled out, paramedics, firefighters, and one sheriff's deputy whose flashlight beam sliced through the darkness. "Over here," I called out, my voice raw and cracking. 3 beams of light found me instantly. "Ma'am, are you injured? Can you walk? What happened?" The questions piled up on top of each other, and I could barely form words. I pointed toward the overturned truck. "My husband. He's in there," I whispered. "Please help him." 2 firefighters rushed to the vehicle. A paramedic knelt beside me, shining a light into my eyes. Her name tag read S. Prescott. She was calm, steady. Her voice anchored me. "Can you tell me your name?" "Katelyn," I managed. "Katelyn Mercer." "All right, Katelyn, you're going to be okay. You've got some cuts, and you're in shock, but you're alert. That's good. I'm going to keep you talking, all right?" I nodded, though my body still trembled. Above us, I heard the firefighters working. Metal groaned. Glass cracked further. One of them shouted, "He's got a pulse!" My stomach flipped. A pulse. Still alive. Prescott helped me onto a stretcher, and as they lifted me up the incline to the road, I caught one last glimpse of the wreck. The beams of flashlights danced across it, creating sharp fragments of light and shadow. My mind replayed everything, not the accident itself, but the intentions that had preceded it. The plan I had nurtured in silence, the thoughts I had allowed to grow. The guilt hit me in waves, even though logic kept whispering. "You didn't do this. You didn't touch the wheel. You didn't cause this wreck." But guilt doesn't need logic. It just needs a little space. As they loaded me into the ambulance, a man stepped into view. Sheriff's Deputy Miles Turner, a local whose family name was practically woven into Magnolia's history. He was tall, with a square jaw, sandy hair, and eyes that had seen more than someone his age should have. He recognized me immediately. "Katelyn?" he said, eyebrows lifting. "It's Deputy Turner. What happened tonight?" I opened my mouth, but my throat tightened. Prescott stepped in quickly, protective. "Deputy, she's in shock. Let us get her stable. You'll have time for questions once she's checked out at the hospital." Turner nodded, but gave me a look, a kind one, but expectant, reassuring, yet steady. He'd be back for answers. The ambulance doors shut, sealing me inside with the harsh glow of emergency lighting. Prescott cleaned the blood on my hands, her movements gentle. "You're lucky," she said softly. "Rollovers like that, most people don't walk away." Lucky. The word didn't fit. Not for me, not for Tyler, not for the truth that lingered behind everything. As the ambulance started toward Magnolia General Hospital, I looked out the small back window. The wreck was barely visible now, just a cluster of flashing lights swallowed by trees. But something else churned inside me. Something I couldn't yet name. Not relief, not grief, not freedom. Something more complicated.
Something heavier. Something waiting. The emergency room smelled like disinfectant, stale coffee, and exhaustion. Nurses moved quickly between beds. Doctors consulted charts. Machines beeped rhythmically. It wasn't chaotic. It was controlled, practiced, full of motion, but never panic. They rolled me into a curtain bay. Prescott stayed with me until a doctor arrived. Blood tests, x-rays, a CT scan. Needles and cold metal and bright lights. Strangers touching my skin with clinical detachment. Physical pain was easy, predictable, understandable. Emotional pain was something else entirely. A nurse handed me a thin hospital blanket. I pulled it tightly around myself, even though the room wasn't cold. Minutes passed, then longer. I lost track of time. At some point, Deputy Turner stepped inside. He removed his hat, holding it under his arm. "Katelyn," he said gently, "mind if I ask you a couple questions?" Prescott looked at him sharply. "Make it quick. She needs to rest." Turner nodded and sat on the edge of a nearby chair. "Can you walk me through what happened tonight?" I swallowed. My voice was low, rough. Tyler was drinking. A lot. I went to pick him up from Rick's. I was driving us home. When we got on County Road 16, he grabbed the wheel. He grabbed it? Why? He said I was going too slow. I whispered. He got angry. He yanked the wheel, and we lost control. The words weren't lies. They were the truth, but they weren't the whole truth. I didn't mention my plan. Not even in the shadows of my own mind could I turn that into words. Turner nodded, jotting down notes. He didn't press. Not yet. He asked, "Was alcohol involved?" "Yes." "You sober?" "Yes." He finished writing. Then he said something unexpected. "You're lucky to be alive. And I don't say this lightly, but people in town know Tyler's temper." My breath caught. "What?" Turner sighed. "Katelyn, Magnolia's small. People notice more than they say. This isn't the first time folks worried about you." My chest tightened. "No one ever said anything. Sometimes people don't know how. And sometimes they're afraid they're wrong. Afraid they're wrong. Afraid they're right." He stood. "I'll come back once we know more about Tyler's condition." He left as quietly as he came. His words echoed in my mind long after he disappeared. People noticed more than they said. That sentence hurt more than the injuries. Hours later, a doctor returned with news. "Katelyn, your injuries are minor. Cuts, bruising, mild concussion. You'll need rest, but you'll recover." I nodded, exhausted. "And my husband?" I asked. The doctor hesitated. "Tyler is in critical condition. He suffered significant head trauma, broken ribs, internal bleeding. He's in surgery now.
The room tilted slightly. Head trauma, internal bleeding, life-threatening injuries. I didn't want him dead. I didn't want to carry that weight. I wanted freedom, not destruction. The doctor placed a hand on my shoulder. "We're doing everything we can." He walked away before I could respond. The hospital room grew still, quiet, too quiet. I stared at the ceiling tiles, counting them, trying to anchor myself to something as my thoughts spiraled.
Was this my fault? Was the universe punishing me? Or saving me? Or something in between? The plan I'd nurtured seemed grotesque now. Stupid. Frightening. I had told myself it was survival. But now, looking at the truth, Tyler crushed in a hospital bed fighting for his life, I felt something I didn't expect. Guilt. Not because I loved him, not because I wished he were safe, but because I had allowed myself to imagine being free through his death. What did that make me? A prisoner? A survivor? A coward? Something darker? I didn't know. All I knew was that the life I'd been trying to escape had shattered, and the pieces were jagged in a new way. A nurse came in and squeezed my hand gently. She said, "You should try to sleep. Tomorrow will be a long day." Sleep felt impossible, but my body was too exhausted to argue. When she turned off the overhead light, the room fell into dusky shadows. I curled on my side, clutching the hospital blanket like a lifeline. I expected nightmares. Instead, I dreamed of silence. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the blinds in thin golden lines. I blinked awake slowly, the events of the night rushing back like a punch to the gut. A soft knock came on the wall outside my curtain. "Katelyn, it's Deputy Turner." I sat up, heart fluttering. "Come in." He stepped inside, removing his hat again. "I won't keep you long, just came to update you." My pulse quickened. "Is Tyler?" "He made it through surgery, but he's unconscious. The doctors say the next 24 hours are critical." I nodded, swallowing the tangle of emotions that rose. Turner continued, "We also had officers check the scene. The tire marks match what you told me. The skid pattern is consistent with someone pulling the wheel sharply from the passenger side." My breath stalled. "You're not under investigation," he added gently. "Everything points to an accident." An accident? That word tasted bitter. Turner paused, choosing his next words carefully. "Katelyn, once this settles, you might want to talk to someone. A counselor, a support group, someone outside Magnolia who can help you sort through everything." I looked down at my bandaged hands. "I'm fine," I lied. "You're not," he said softly. "But you can be." He set a card on the small table beside my bed. "If you need anything, anything at all, you call." Then he left, and I was alone again. Alone with the truth, alone with the guilt, alone with the reality that everything had changed. Tyler was alive. Barely. I was alive. The wreck didn't just break metal. It broke the silence of my life, and the truth that followed was heavier than the accident itself.
Morning in Magnolia has a strange way of pretending nothing bad ever happens here. The world keeps spinning, the sun keeps rising, and people keep sweeping their porches like the night before didn't split someone's life in half. As I sat in the hospital room the next day, wrapped in a lone sweatshirt and sipping lukewarm tea. The entire world outside looked too normal for what I felt inside. Tyler was in the ICU. Machines breathed for him, beeped for him, and measured the fragile line between living and not. I had been told multiple times that this wasn't my fault, that the wreck was caused by alcohol and a split-second act of recklessness. But the guilt still sat on my chest, like a weight I couldn't push off. The doctor, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, entered my room just after noon. "Katelyn," he began gently, "Tyler is still unconscious. We won't know the extent of his brain injury until he wakes up, if he wakes up." The words hit like cold water. "If," I repeated. He nodded. He said, "There was significant trauma. We're monitoring swelling, but I want you prepared. Cases like this can go in many directions." I nodded, but my mind wasn't following. It drifted in and out, replaying the accident, replaying moments from our marriage, replaying the look on Tyler's face before he grabbed the wheel. Anger, mixed with something I hadn't recognized at the time. Sabotage. Control. He just couldn't stand not being in charge, not even for a moment. The doctor left me alone with thoughts that spiraled in dangerous directions. All the moments he'd yelled, all the nights I'd cried silently so he wouldn't hear it, all the apologies I'd whispered to myself for things that weren't my fault. And somewhere in the middle of it all, that plan, the one I'd made in secret, the one I never acted on, the one that now haunted me even though I hadn't touched the wheel. A whisper inside me said, "This wasn't your doing. This wasn't your fault. This was going to happen with or without you." But the human mind doesn't take comfort easily. Around mid-afternoon, Deputy Turner returned. He stood in the doorway, hat in his hands, expression gentle. "May I come in?" I nodded. He sat down in the same chair he'd used the night before, resting his elbows on his knees. "I visited Tyler," he said quietly. "The doctors filled me in." My fingers tightened around the styrofoam cup. Is he suffering?" Turner shook his head. "He's sedated, not in pain." A strange mix of relief and sorrow washed over me. Turner let a long silence pass before he spoke again. "I want to tell you something, and I need you to hear it with clear ears." I looked up. "This accident was not your fault. You were driving responsibly. You were sober. He grabbed the wheel. That's reckless endangerment on his part, plain and simple." I swallowed. I know what the skid marks show, but I also know what I felt inside that truck. If he had died, part of me... I stopped myself. Turner's gaze didn't shift. He didn't look shocked or judgmental. "You've been living in fear a long time. People who live in fear think things they don't mean. They imagine escape because their body is trying to survive. That's not wrongdoing, that's instinct." Instinct. The word soothed something raw inside me. Still, I whispered, "But I thought about it. I thought about making an accident happen." Turner leaned forward. "But you didn't. That matters. Intent is a complicated thing when you're living through hell. Hell." He said it plainly, like it wasn't a secret. People who haven't lived with someone like Tyler don't understand what it does to you, how it changes the way you think, how it twists survival into something that feels like guilt even when it isn't. His words struck a part of me I had buried deep. I wiped my eyes. "What happens now?" "Well," Turner said, "first, Tyler's medical situation will determine a lot. But as far as the accident goes, you're clear. There's no criminal investigation. The wreck was entirely consistent with his actions, not yours." I exhaled shakily. Then he added, "But Katelyn, I'd recommend you talk to someone, a domestic violence advocate,
a counselor, you're carrying years of things you couldn't say out loud. You don't have to carry them alone anymore. I nodded slowly. He stood. Whatever happens next, he said softly, you're not trapped anymore. He left me with that sentence, and it echoed through my mind for hours. You're not trapped anymore. I had lived so long believing freedom was a fantasy, something other women had, something I wasn't allowed. The accident had cracked something open I didn't know existed. Possibility. A life where I wasn't flinching every time a door closed. A life where dinner didn't feel like walking a tightrope. A life where my opinions mattered. A life where I didn't have to hide. A life where Tyler didn't dictate the air I breathed. But freedom wasn't instant. It came with fear, with guilt, with a strange numbness I didn't know how to navigate. I didn't celebrate, didn't smile, didn't feel victorious. I felt empty. And in that emptiness, something new was beginning to form. Identity. 2 days passed. I slept little, ate less, and replayed every mistake I thought I'd made in the last 10 years. The hospital allowed me to visit Tyler only once, escorted by a nurse. The sight of him unmade me. He lay pale, swollen, wrapped in bandages. A brace held his neck still. A ventilator breathed for him, rising and falling with a mechanical rhythm that didn't match the man I had married. The man who used to tower over me, intimidate me, now looked like a child, a broken child. I sat beside the bed, hands folded tightly in my lap. I didn't want this, I whispered. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the full truth either. I didn't want him dead. I didn't want to carry guilt. I didn't want to be the last voice he ever heard. But I had wanted the fear to stop. And the accident had stopped it in the only language Tyler ever understood: violence. I would have left someday. I swear I would have. But even that felt like a weak promise to myself. Leaving had always felt like impossible. He had torn down my confidence piece by piece until I didn't think I had the right to walk away. A tear slipped down my cheek. Not for him, for the woman I used to be. I reached out and touched the blanket near his hand. Not his hand, just the blanket. I said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry things became what they did. I'm sorry neither of us knew how to stop it before it came to this. There was no movement, no response, just the steady hiss of the ventilator. I didn't wait for anything. I simply stood and left, closing the door behind me. For the first time in our entire marriage, I walked away from Tyler without fear. The next morning, the hospital social worker visited my room. She wore a soft gray sweater and had a voice like warm tea. Katelyn, I want to check in with you. How are you coping? I almost laughed at the absurdity of the question. I don't know, I said honestly. I feel nothing and everything. She nodded knowingly.
That's normal. Trauma doesn't follow a schedule. It rises and falls. She handed me a small stack of pamphlets. One was for counseling services, one for a regional domestic violence shelter, should I need safe housing, one for support groups. I stared at the names and numbers, overwhelmed. Then she said something that cut through the noise. You are allowed to rebuild, even if the pieces don't look familiar at first. My throat tightened. She left me with that thought. Allowed to rebuild. Not punished, not condemned, not guilty, allowed. It was a foreign concept. Later that afternoon, the doctor returned with an update. Katelyn, we saw some movement. Tyler squeezed a nurse's fingers. I inhaled sharply. He's still not awake, he continued,
but this is a sign his brain is responding. My chest tightened with conflicting emotions. Relief, fear, uncertainty. If he lived, what then? Would he recover fully? Would he remember? Would he try to come home? The thought sent a cold tremor through me. I didn't want revenge, but I didn't want to go back. The doctor must have seen the look in my eyes because he said gently, "You don't need to think about the future yet. Focus on healing." But healing required a decision I hadn't voiced yet, a decision I'd avoided for years, a decision that was no longer optional. The next morning, I made it. I was discharged from the hospital with a bag of medications, a list of instructions, and bruises that painted my body like storm clouds. My friend Marla, a coworker from the pharmacy, picked me up. She hugged me gently, as if I were made of glass. "You'll stay with me," she insisted, "no arguing." I didn't argue. Her home was small, warm, full of soft blankets and candles that smelled like vanilla. It felt safe in a way I hadn't felt in years. That night, lying on her guest bed, I stared at the ceiling and whispered the truth I had been avoiding. I'm not going back. I didn't know if Tyler would wake up. I didn't know if he would walk again. I didn't even know if he would remember the accident. But I knew this. I would no longer be his wife, in anything but legal terms. I would no longer shrink myself to fit his anger. I would no longer carry the burden of silence. I would rebuild. Maybe slowly, maybe imperfectly, maybe painfully. But I would rebuild. Tyler regained consciousness 5 days later. The nurse called Marla's house early in the morning. She said, "He's awake, still weak, confused. We don't know the full extent of his memory yet." My stomach twisted, but I didn't go to the hospital. Not that day, not the next, not even the one after that. I sent a message to the nurse asking for updates. Tyler's condition stabilized. His memory was foggy, patchy, disjointed. He didn't ask for me, not once. And that somehow told me everything I needed to know. 2 weeks after the accident, I sat at Marla's kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a stack of papers. Divorce papers. My hands trembled as I signed them, not from fear, but from release, from the knowledge that I was closing a chapter that had nearly ended me. Marla squeezed my shoulder. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. I didn't feel proud. Not yet. But I felt alive. And for the first time in a long time, alive was enough. Tyler eventually recovered enough to speak. His sister called to tell me he was asking questions, fragmented ones, simple ones. But he never asked to see me, never asked where I was. He remembered the bar. He remembered the drive. He remembered grabbing the wheel. He didn't remember blaming me. He didn't remember the years of anger. He didn't remember the type of man he had become. But I did. And that was enough to keep me moving forward. The truth I live with now is simple. I didn't kill my husband, but I also didn't save him. Life made the decision for me in a way I never could have. And in surviving the accident, I survived the marriage. I live in a small apartment on the other side of Magnolia now. I work full-time. I attend a support group. I talk when I need to. I cry when I need to. I sleep with the windows open because I'm not afraid of footsteps outside anymore. Sometimes, late at night, I drive down County Road 16. I pull off to the side, roll down the windows, and breathe in the quiet. The curve is still there. The trees are still tall. The shadows are still deep. But I'm not the same woman who drove that road before. I walk away now. I choose my own path. I live without apology. The accident didn't give me freedom. I did. And for the first time in my life, I survived myself.